And hello, everyone. Thank you for being here at Action Hub for our new amazing talk about broken nature by Paola Antonelli. Paola Antonelli is, for me, one of the most exceptional human beings I have ever met in my life. She not only is the senior curator of design architecture at the MoMA in New York and founding director of research and development, but she is one of the most curious minds, again, I have ever met. In fact, her nickname is Curious Octopus on Twitter, actually so. And she will tell us about one of her latest creation, Broken Nature. More information will be put in the chat. And please, Paola, the talking stick is yours. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. And it's all right back at you. And dear Earth Action Hub participants, dear friends, dear colleagues, thank you so much for being live with us on Biodiversity Day, I just found out. Well, biodiversity definitely is key to our survival on Earth and to the survival of all species. But today, I'm going to share my screen with you right away to tell you about not only broken nature, but also what can be done by citizens all over the world to actually have a more restorative attitude. So the lecture is actually called Broken Nature Design Tools for Citizens and Activists. I know that today you've already had some presentations by bona fide designers or architects, so you've had a chance to really experience live what it means to use architecture and design as allies. Truth is, architecture and design are about life, so they really can help us enact our deepest thoughts. As Paola mentioned, Broken Nature is one of my latest jobs and projects. And it was the 22nd Triennale di Milano. I wasn't born there, but I lived there. I'm from Milan. And this is a building that's all devoted to architecture and design exhibitions. And I was allowed to prepare one of these triennial exhibitions. I entitled it Broken Nature to talk about the fact that we have, as human species, severed many of our ties with nature, but we can do something to repair them. We can have a restorative and reparative attitude, and perhaps we can also use kintsetsu and actually, like Japanese broken pottery, we can fix it with gold and make it even more precious than before. There's so much we can do as citizens, and the exhibition really was meant for citizens. Together with my gorgeous curatorial group that was also composed of Ala Tanir, Laura Mairan, and Erica Petrillo, we had three goals in mind. We wanted the exhibition to be for citizens, and we wanted citizens to come to the show and leave, first goal, with a sense of long time. You know, it's very important in order to have a sense of responsibility to think of the generations that will come, to think of the planets that will come, to think of a time that is so far longer than our own small life and is longer maybe even of trees' life and planets' lives. And in order to do so, we had many different points in the exhibition that spoke about long time. The second goal was to make sure that people would leave having a sense of the fact that we live in complex systems. Everything is interconnected. Climate justice is interconnected with racial justice, with economics, dynamics, with geopolitics. Everything is interconnected. And that complexity can be our friend if we can tackle it with the right tools. So that was the second goal. The third goal was to make sure that everybody that came to the exhibition would leave having a sense of what they could do in their everyday life to have a more restorative attitude. So you see here the entrance of the exhibition where we showed NASA's images of change. They are online and they're open to everyone. They're pictures of before and after of different parts of Earth, before and after maybe human-made interventions and some other natural catastrophes, before and after 3 months or 3 centuries, but they give you a sense of time. And I'm so sorry that I can't go through every single object in the exhibition. Otherwise, you would also see one of the most beautiful pieces by Paola Bay herself. So she also participated in the exhibition, but I only had 20 minutes and I really want to give you all the tools at my disposal. So I was telling you about this idea of restorative attitude, right? So restorative attitude means being able to really think about our responsibility on Earth. But that does not mean that we cannot still make the best out of our lives and out of the lives of everyone around us. There can still be pleasure, there can still be curiosity, there can still be elegance and beauty around us. That doesn't mean that we have to do without them. We can design our lives to be better without making them less valuable to us. So you see in the exhibition, there were all these examples of beauty. This is an example, a little female octopus called Mercy that became the star of the show, recognizing a 3D printed ammonite shell from one of her ancestors thousands and thousands of years ago. And even though she did not know to have a shell or a house, she looked at this shell and immediately made it her own. So much was the call of the instinct of that kind of domesticity across millennia. So the beauty of the sense of time that can be canceled just because of our instinct is really powerful. Restorative attitudes come in many different forms. There's the most literal one. You see here the work of Alex Goad, who's an Australian designer who's producing these 3D printed ceramic trellises that can be deposited in the ocean so as to replenish the coral reef. Even in this case, decades and decades will take, even centuries, but it will get there. So this is the most typical restorative attitude. Other restorative attitudes are about reducing waste or using waste as a new material or having objects that last for a really long time. Talking about reducing waste or using waste as a new material, I would like to point out to you another beautiful project by Atelier Luma, that is an atelier in France. They have started an algae lab. It's a lab that teaches people all over the world how to transform their algae. And you know, algae is a byproduct of our pollution. There are so many phosphates in water that in many parts of the world that there's an overproliferation of algae. So Atelier Luma is teaching people all over the world to take these algae and make them into bioplastics. So with a few chemical processes, you can make them into this slurry that can then be 3D printed, even with the shapes of the vessels from your own material culture. And, you know, they have done projects like this, of course, in France, then they've done them in Istanbul, Turkey, and even in my native land, which is the island of Sardinia. And you can see that there are these beautiful vessels that look like the tea cups from Istanbul or look like certain plates from Sardinia. So it's about giving back to material culture what has been taken away from the nature of the place. Another great example of how to use waste as a new material is this work by Fantasma. They're two Italian designers living in the Netherlands who took electronic waste, so all the leftovers, computers, boards, all sorts of e-waste, and made these beautiful objects out of them. They could be office furniture produced by sleek Italian manufacturers, but the truth is, these beautiful objects are just a way to attract the attention and then instead denounce the criminal underbelly, criminal for nature and for humans, exploitative of labor, of the electronic waste network. As you might know, so much of the pollution that we produce in the global north ends up in the global south or ends up in India or in different parts of China. And there's a toxicity level to e-waste that cannot be matched elsewhere. So it was a way for the two designers of Fantasma to actually do an investigative reporting using design as a tool. So you're seeing here one example after the other. You're getting tools as citizens that get you thinking about what you can do in your everyday life. Designers also show a way forward in a more poetic stance, in a more poetic way. As you know very well, today's Biodiversity Day, as I said, and all over the world, you who are listening don't need to be told how fundamental empathy is for us to move forward. And in this particular case, this designer, Thomas Thwaites, has decided to really test empathy to the best of his ability by deciding to become a goat for 4 days. So he studied goats' behavior for a long time together with a zoologist. And he built this contraption that enables him to really move like a goat. He even built an outsourced gastrointestinal system so that he could eat and digest what goats eat and digest. And then he decamped to the Alps for 4 days to be a goat. And the funny thing is, goats, and of course, animals tend to be so much more generous than we are. Goats just like hosted him. They said, okay, come on over, you're our friend. And that's what he did for 4 days. And then he published a book about it. And he was forever changed, as you can imagine. So this idea of being able to feel the other, to feel other species, to feel even other entities is key to everything that we do. And one of the most beautiful pieces in the exhibition is not the work of a designer, but is the work of an artist. I'm going to get to it right away. It's important to see how designers and artists can help us really think forward and think beyond. And you see here the work of Laura Aguilar. Laura Aguilar was, because unfortunately she passed away, a wonderful artist and photographer based in Los Angeles. She was Chicana, so Mexican-American, and she had just the most compassionate mind and compassionate imagination and vision I've ever seen. And she used to say that she identified with boulders. So she made this series of self-portraits of her own body in nature. How beautiful is this picture in which Laura's body, so gorgeous in its non-classical, at least to the repressive and oppressive and suffocating Western standards, is in front of this boulder. There's a power to this image that I think transcends any kind of speech and any kind of plan. It really is about feeling and understanding and being one with nature. Now, Broken Nature was a big exhibition. It now is in a very, very small format in New York City at the Museum of Modern Art. It came there. And we're trying to make it gaseous, right? We're trying to make so that it can permeate the whole world. But in Milan, I knew that the exhibition was a success because, as I mentioned to you, it was for citizens and citizens used it. People came to talk to us. People had ideas. There were comments. There was back and forth. And most proud I was that it was 2019, the kids that were doing Fridays for the Future, that were following Greta Thunberg's ideas, would meet at the Triennale to start marching. That means that our exhibition was really used as a tool. And remember, this speech today is about using design as a tool for activists and citizens. And that's why I would like to mention also another project that I'm really proud of, which is called Design Emergency. It's actually on Instagram, and I think that Paola has put it in the chat. It's design.emergency. It's something that I started with my great friend, Alice Rawsthorne, who's also a great design critic, a year ago, when the pandemic started and we were all locked down. We were listening, I was listening to Fat Joe, who's a hip hop artist from New York, from the Bronx. I was listening to him, and he was having every night an Instagram live. He was talking to people, and I thought, Alice and I can do something like this and really explain to people the power of design by showing examples of what some designers are doing to respond to the pandemic. We started right away. One of our first interviews was with Alyssa Eckert. Alyssa Eckert is one of the 2 illustrators at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta that designed the image of the coronavirus that we know everywhere. The coronavirus is not perfectly round with those scary red spikes, the S proteins. No, it's kind of a gray blob. You can't even really see it. You have to send an electron beam to kind of touch the surface of the virus. So it's been a real communication design choice to make it so scary. And so deep water mine-like, right? So we interviewed Alyssa, and examples like this of design were also paired with examples of design like the forgettable cover first page of the New York Times when the United States reached 100,000 deaths for the coronavirus. So there's never been a New York Times first page without an image, and instead it was only the names of the people that had died. It was really, even in this case, a strong example of design. So we thought that by showing what was happening to everyone all over the world, people would understand better the amazing articulation of design. We interviewed not only designers, but also accidental designers, like this anesthesiologist from Bologna that devised a split ventilator overnight together with some engineers and some friends. And instead, on the right-hand side, very pedigreed designers from the agency in Wellington, New Zealand, that devised the campaign for awareness of COVID and how to behave in New Zealand, which Alice and I deemed to be the best campaign that we could find. We talked to these teenagers in Afghanistan that had gotten together, nerdy engineering teenagers, female teenagers that had gotten together and immediately had started producing PPE and ventilators for Afghanistan. And also, we started looking at the future beyond the pandemic. We looked, for instance, at the Great Green Wall of Africa, one of these epic projects that we hope will happen in the future, a wall of greenery that is going to cross Africa from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Indian Ocean and is going to coast the Sahel Desert and hopefully help replenish the climate in Africa. And we interviewed also other examples of great designers and architects from all over the world. For instance, Vinu Daniel from the Kerala state in India, who is following Mahatma Gandhi's diktat that one should build a village using only the materials that can be found 5 miles or 15 minutes around the village. So what Vinu says, if what you find is waste and trash, that's what you're going to build in with. And you can build really beautiful churches and houses using trash. So you see, these are just very few examples of what can be done. And what is important to know is that there is always a design emergency. This has become my motto because every time there is an emergency in the world, design can be there to help. So Broken Nature has become a podcast. And MoMA has produced a podcast in 4 episodes right now that uses design to talk, for instance, about the food system with corn and the relationships between Mexico and the United States, or about the fashion system, should secondhand be our first choice, or about our bodies and climate change and whether our bodies should be changed to withstand climate or whether we should do something more profound. And last but not least, the rights of nature in the last episode of the podcast that is entitled, Who is a River? But the truth is we need to understand that we are part of nature as human beings. That's one of the most important paradigm shifts. It seems so obvious, it seems so silly to even mention it, but so much of the disastrous situation we're in comes from the fact that we have considered ourselves other, better, higher, different. We're not. Whatever we do to nature, we do to ourselves. And if that's what we have to come to, this kind of self-centered notion, that's it. And I want you to know that I'm showing you some of my projects, but there's so much going on right now in the world, dozens and dozens of wonderful projects by designers, by museums, by architects, by thinkers. The Biennale of Venice just opened 3 days ago, the Biennale of Architecture. It's dedicated to the idea of how will we live together in the future, together with other species. And there's also a pavilion of the Biennale that's devoted to a future assembly. Who are the stakeholders of a future UN that is not only human, but is more than human? That's an idea. There are so many thoughts that are lingering and moving in that direction because what the pandemic has shown to us is that we are part of nature and we cannot control it if we don't have everything under control. And the coronavirus has shown us that nature takes over, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, the minute we let our guard down. So the skies in Beijing and Delhi were clear. In Los Angeles, you could see the mountain with snow. In Venice, well, that was kind of a joke, but you could see fake dolphins from some of the photomontages that were sent around the internet. And animals took back the cities that we stole from them. So there are these like hilarious pictures of animals taking over the whole world. But, you know, without being facetious, truth is we need to think higher, bigger, farther, and architecture, design, and art can really help us. I would like to close with this quote by a mathematician from 1928, Frank Rancy. he said that discounting the interests of future people is ethically indefensible and arises merely from the weakness of imagination. That was 1928. We can say today that it's not only about people, it's also about other species. And in truth, we have to make sure that we don't, as a wonderful fashion designer from South Africa told me, Katekani Moreku, we have to make sure we do not steal from the future, because that's what being irresponsible is. Thank you very much.
Wow, Paola, it's fascinating what you're doing. I haven't even catch up myself with what you're doing. We have time to talk about it another day. I have a question for you. And the question is, what are the most relevant tools do we need to apply to live in harmony with Mother Nature from a design architecture point of view, as it's such a wide, what you're doing has such a wide spectrum, and it's really fascinating.
Well, there are so many different tools that are possible, but I really like the idea of looking to the material wisdom of the place where you live, right? It doesn't mean that everybody should only work like Vinu Daniel in Kerala by using only the materials and the craftsmanship of the place. But I think it should start from there. You should always think of context and of future. So Vinu works that way, and many other designers. There's also Xu Tiantian in China, who's doing a beautiful job that way. But what I think is important is to learn from the past in order to make the future. So there's an artist. Her name is Ursula Beeman. She has worked for a long time in Colombia, and she even started an indigenous university there with the people there. And she has this figure of the indigenous scientist as the key to the future, a cross between a shaman and elder and a scientist that bridges wisdoms and knowledges. I think that that's what's important. Even though I might seem a little abstract to you, I think it's important to always have a sense of where things come from in order to understand where they're going.
Thank you, Paola. Actually, Vino, I would like to invite him next Earth Action Hub, because since you introduced him to a design emergency, I've been exploring him, and he's awesome. He's such a humble human being as well. And it's amazing how all these sort of change makers like you have also a big heart. They don't just think from here, but they think from down here. And that's why they're doing exceptional things in changing the way we live and how much we are using and taking from nature. And if I may say, Paola, you're becoming a bit of an indigenous shaman and grandmother. Yes. Without knowing, you start speaking that language. I'm sure your husband is going to have a big laugh when I'm going to tell him, because he's always accused me of being stuck with my elders. But your wisdom is truly amazing, and I wish we could spend another 10 hours online with you, listening to all this incredible project. And maybe one day Earth Action Hub will be able to host a little bit of a longer conversation with you. But I know you're super busy because the Venice Biennale is happening, and we also have another back-to-back talk after this one on Earth Action Hub. So, Paola, thank you from the deep of my heart.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you super soon. Thank you.
Ciao.
And thank you, everyone. Bye.